When Daniel told me we were bankrupt, I remember the exact sound of the word as it left his mouth. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was soft, too soft, like a line rehearsed in front of a mirror. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt toast still in the air, the morning light cutting across the marble counter. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Grace, it's all gone." And just like that, the life I thought we built together, the home, the cars, the business, vanished into that single sentence. For the first few minutes I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just watched him pour his coffee as if nothing had changed. My husband, the man I trusted with everything, calmly added sugar, stirred it twice, and took a sip. "How?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and said, "Bad investments. The market turned. You wouldn't understand, Grace." He'd always said that. You wouldn't understand. It was the phrase he used when he wanted me quiet, when he didn't want me to ask too many questions. That morning I obeyed. I told myself this was temporary, a setback. Daniel was smart, successful, respected. He'd built his logistics company from scratch. If anyone could fix it, it was him. So I held his hand and said, "We'll get through this together." He smiled, a quick, tired smile, and kissed my forehead. "That's my girl." I didn't know then that behind that smile lived a secret so cruel it would destroy the last piece of innocence I had left. Daniel and I had been married 15 years. We met when I was 23, working as an assistant at a local real estate firm. He was one of our clients. Ambitious, charming, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone turn their heads. Our love story wasn't perfect, but it was passionate. I believed in him, in us. Together, we built a comfortable life. A 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, 2 kids, and a family business that felt like our shared dream. He ran the numbers. I managed the people. We were partners, or so I thought. Evenings used to be my favorite time. After the kids were asleep, we'd sit on the back porch with a glass of wine, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He'd talk about expanding, maybe opening another branch. I'd smile, imagining our children taking over one day. Those small moments, the way his hand rested on mine, the sound of his laugh, the comfort of his scent, were the foundation of my faith in him. But faith, I've learned, is fragile. It only takes one lie to shatter it. After Daniel's bankruptcy confession, everything changed. He stopped coming home for dinner, claiming he had to meet investors or work late. He'd whisper on the phone in the hallway, lowering his voice when I walked by. Bills started piling up. The credit cards were maxed out. Even the kids noticed the tension. One night my son asked, "Mom, are we poor now?" I smiled through the ache in my chest and said, "We're just adjusting, sweetheart. We'll be fine." But deep down I wasn't sure. To cut costs, I took over managing what was left of the business finances. Daniel hesitated when I suggested it. Almost too much. He said he'd handle it himself, but after weeks of seeing unpaid invoices and staff leaving, I insisted. "Grace, it's complicated," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "I can handle complicated," I replied. He sighed, finally relenting. "Fine, but don't expect miracles. There's not much left to manage." That was the first lie I caught, though I didn't know it yet. When I opened the office files, everything looked normal on the surface: clean spreadsheets, labeled folders, the usual corporate chaos. But something didn't feel right. The numbers didn't match the invoices. There were consultant fees that no one could explain. And one account, listed under personal development, had a series of large payments labeled simply as special services. I asked our accountant, Martin, about it. He looked nervous. You'd have to ask Daniel about those, Mrs. James." "Why?" "They're executive expenses." His tone said more than his words. That night I brought it up to Daniel. "What are these special services payments?" He frowned. "Don't worry about it. They're part of a supplier arrangement." Why is it under personal development? He slammed his glass down harder than he meant to. Because I said so, Grace. Stop playing detective. I flinched. He'd never raised his voice to me before. That was when I knew something was deeply wrong. A week later, I went into the office early, before anyone else arrived. The building was quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights echoing through the hallway. I logged into Daniel's computer, my hands trembling slightly. He never shared passwords with me, but I knew enough about him to guess. He always used dates that mattered to him: his birthday, our anniversary, or his company's founding date. On the third try, I was in. I opened the financial software and started tracing the special services payments. They led to an offshore account, under a name I didn't recognize: Cynthia Hale. The transactions were regular, monthly. Large amounts. Too large. The last payment? $1 million, labeled performance bonus. I felt my stomach twist. Who was Cynthia Hale? I scrolled through old emails and found a thread between Daniel and a C. Hale. The subject line read, "Personal arrangement. Confidential." The first line I saw froze my blood. "You deserve every dollar, baby. You've kept me sane through the chaos. Don't worry, Grace thinks we're broke." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I couldn't breathe. I read that line again and again until the words blurred. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grab the edge of the desk to steady myself. It wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty. He didn't just cheat on me. He used our supposed bankruptcy as a cover to fund his mistress. I closed the laptop and stared at the reflection of my face on the dark screen. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hollow eyes, trembling lips, a storm brewing inside. In that moment, something inside me broke. But another thing was born: resolve. If Daniel thought I wouldn't understand, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. That night, I lay awake beside him, my body stiff with rage and disbelief. He slept soundly, even snored. I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest and wondered how many lies could live inside one person. I thought about all the times he told me not to worry, all the dinners I'd cooked while he claimed to be at networking events, all the tears I'd wiped away from our kids' eyes when they asked why Dad never came home before bedtime. I stared at the ceiling until the first light of dawn crept through the blinds. By then, I knew I couldn't confront him yet, not without proof. If I accused him too soon, he'd deny everything. He was good at that. Daniel could turn any argument around and make me feel guilty for even asking. No, I needed to be sure. I needed to see it. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and went straight to the office. My heart pounded as I walked into the conference room where Martin, our accountant, was sorting through files. "Martin," I said quietly, closing the door behind me, "I need you to be honest with me." He looked up, startled. "Mrs. James." "Grace," I corrected. "Please. I'm not here to get you in trouble." He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. "If this is about Daniel's accounts." "It is," I said. "And I already know about Cynthia Hale." His face went pale. "Oh my God. So it's true." He sighed, defeated. "I wanted to tell you, Grace, but Daniel said you knew. He said Cynthia was a consultant for the company." "Consultant?" I repeated, bitterness coating the word. "Is that what they're calling mistresses now?" Martin's silence was answer enough. I asked for every file, every transaction, every email. He hesitated, then handed me a flash drive. "It's all there," he said softly. "Be careful. Daniel doesn't like people looking into his business." "I'm not people," I said. "I'm his wife." That evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. For hours I read. There were hotel invoices, travel expenses disguised as client meetings, and payments for jewelry and designer handbags. I found pictures too, selfies of Daniel and Cynthia at a resort in Bali. In one, he was holding her hand. In another, he was kissing her on the forehead. The same gentle kiss he used to give me when I made his morning coffee. Every photo felt like a knife twisting deeper. By 2 a.m., I sat there in the dark, surrounded by proof of my husband's double life. And as I stared at those images, a thought crossed my mind, cold, sharp, and clear. If he can build this lie so carefully, then I can build the truth just as carefully. For the next 2 weeks I played my part. I smiled. I cooked his favorite meals. I even told him I was proud of how he was handling the bankruptcy. He relaxed around me again, convinced I was still the trusting wife he'd always known. He didn't notice the way I watched him, how I memorized every word, every glance at his phone. During those days, I transferred all the files from the flash drive onto a secure folder in my personal cloud. Then I made an appointment with a lawyer, an old college friend who owed me a favor. When I showed her the documents, she whistled. "Grace, this isn't just infidelity, it's embezzlement. These are company funds." My heart sank. Does that mean he could go to jail? Potentially. But the bigger question is, what do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for the years I'd wasted believing in him. "I want the truth out," I said finally. Publicly. He took everything from me. My trust, my savings, my peace. I want him to face what he's done. My lawyer nodded. "Then we'll make sure he does." A week later, the company held its annual staff meeting. The one where Daniel always boasted about our resilience in tough times. He invited investors, employees, even family. I told him I'd help organize it, pretending to be supportive. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "I knew I could count on you, Grace." He had no idea what was coming. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. My nerves buzzed, but beneath the fear was a strange calm. The kind that comes when you've already survived the worst. When I arrived at the hotel ballroom, everything looked perfect. Polished floors, silver platters of hors d'oeuvres, the company banner reading James Logistics, built on integrity. I almost laughed at the irony. As the presentation began, Daniel took the stage in his crisp suit, radiating confidence. "We've had challenges," he said, "but we're stronger than ever, with transparency and trust." I stood up. Transparency. The room fell silent. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Grace, honey, what are you?" "Tell them, Daniel," I said calmly, holding up a folder. "Tell them about the $1 million bonus you paid to your consultant." Or should I? A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras came up. Phones started recording. Daniel's face drained of color. "Grace, not here." "Oh, here is perfect," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Because this is where you built your lies, in front of these people." I opened the folder and began reading. Payment of $1 million to Cynthia Hale, listed under personal development expenses. Signed by Daniel James. Someone gasped. A few people whispered. My lawyer, standing at the back, gave me a small nod. Daniel stammered. "This is a misunderstanding. Is that what you told her?" I said softly. "That I wouldn't understand." The silence that followed was deafening. I took a deep breath and closed the folder. "I'm filing for divorce, Daniel. And for the record, the only thing bankrupt here is your integrity." I walked out to the sound of murmurs, flashes, and the shattering of everything he thought he could control. Outside, the cold evening air hit my face like freedom. For the first time in months, I felt alive. But it wasn't over yet. There were still lawyers to meet, accounts to close, a house to leave behind. I knew rebuilding wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I'd never again live inside someone else's lie. And somewhere, deep in the quiet of my heart, I felt the first spark of something new: strength. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, coworkers, even distant relatives. Some were supportive, others curious. A few pretending to check in just to gossip. Daniel's face was already all over social media. Someone had leaked the video of my confrontation at the meeting, the one where I exposed him. It had gone viral overnight in the business community. The headlines were brutal. CEO accused of paying mistress $1 million bonus. Wife publicly confronts husband over company scandal. I didn't post it. I didn't have to. Truth has a way of spreading on its own when it's finally free. Daniel called me 17 times before noon. I didn't answer. When he finally showed up at the house, his shirt untucked and eyes red, I was packing boxes in the living room. "Grace," he said, breathless, "we need to talk." I didn't look up. There's nothing left to say. He ran a hand through his hair. "You humiliated me. In front of everyone." I closed a box slowly, taping the lid shut. "I didn't humiliate you, Daniel. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He took a step closer, his voice breaking. "You don't understand," Cynthia meant nothing. I was lost. I finally looked up, meeting his eyes. "You weren't lost. You were comfortable. You built a kingdom of lies and expected me to keep pretending it was a palace." He flinched. "Please, Grace. We can fix this. I'll pay it back. I'll make it right." I shook my head. "You can't pay back dignity, Daniel." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Leave," I said quietly. "Before the kids come home." He hesitated, then turned toward the door. As he left, I caught the faintest trace of his cologne, once comforting, now nauseating. The moment the door shut, I sank to the floor and cried, not because I still loved him, but because I finally didn't. For the next few weeks, I lived like a ghost inside my own life. The divorce paperwork moved quickly, thanks to my lawyer's efficiency and the mountain of evidence I had. The company board voted to remove Daniel as CEO pending investigation. Cynthia vanished, her social media deleted, her number disconnected. But even with justice unfolding, I felt hollow. People congratulated me for being strong. But strength doesn't feel like power. Feels like exhaustion. Like waking up every morning and forcing yourself to breathe through the ache. I spent my days reorganizing. Not just the house, but my thoughts. Every corner of our home held reminders of him. The coffee mug with his initials. The tie rack he never used. The photo of us at our 10th anniversary dinner, smiling like two people who had no idea what was coming. One evening, while boxing up the last of his things, my daughter Lily walked into the room. She was only 11, but her eyes carried more understanding than I expected. "Mom," she asked softly, "are you mad at Dad?" I paused, holding a picture frame in my hands. I admitted. "But now, I'm just sad." "Will he come home?" "No, sweetheart. He won't." She nodded slowly, thinking. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe that's okay. Sometimes people shouldn't live together if one of them keeps secrets." Her innocence cut through me like sunlight through fog. I smiled, pulling her close. "You're wiser than you know." That night, after tucking her in, I realized something. I'd been surviving for so long, I'd forgotten what living felt like. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. The court awarded me partial ownership of the company, along with enough assets to start over. I sold the house, the walls held too many ghosts, and rented a small place near the edge of town. It was modest, but it was mine. I painted the kitchen yellow, filled the windowsills with plants, and bought a second-hand coffee maker that hissed and sputtered every morning like it was learning to breathe too. For the first time in years, I woke up without dread. One morning, while dropping the kids off at school, I saw a for lease sign on a small storefront downtown. It was empty, just bare walls and sunlight pouring through dusty glass. But something about it called to me. By the end of the week, I'd signed the papers. I used part of my settlement to open a small cafe, Grace Grounds. It started humbly. 3 tables, 1 espresso machine, and a chalkboard menu I wrote by hand. But people came. They stayed. They talked. They laughed. Within months, it became a quiet refuge for locals. A place where people nursed heartbreaks, celebrated milestones, or simply sat in silence with a cup of something warm. and in serving them I found healing. Every latte I made, every story I heard across the counter, reminded me of what I'd forgotten: connection, humanity, the quiet beauty of ordinary days. Sometimes, when I wiped down the counter at closing time, I'd catch my reflection in the window and think about Daniel. He'd lost everything. His job, his reputation, even the house. Word was he'd left the country to start fresh. I didn't hate him anymore. I pitied him. Because while I had to rebuild from ashes, at least I still had a soul. One rainy afternoon, almost a year later, I was serving coffee to a customer when a familiar voice said behind me, "Grace." I turned and there he was. Daniel. He looked older, thinner. The confident gleam in his eyes had dulled into something fragile. "Daniel," I said, keeping my tone neutral, "you look different." He smiled weakly. "You opened a cafe. It suits you." "Thank you." "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling, "for everything." I set down the mug I was holding. "You already said that, just not to me." He nodded, shame washing over his face. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "You're right," I said softly. "But you still get it." He looked surprised. "You forgive me?" "I do," I said. "But forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. It's just my way of letting go." He nodded, tears brimming. "You've changed, Grace." "I had to," I said. "You left me no choice." He looked around the cafe, his gaze lingering on the people laughing at the corner table. "You built something beautiful." I smiled faintly. "I built something honest." And for the first time he didn't have a clever reply. He just nodded and walked out, leaving a small puddle of rain where he'd stood. I watched him disappear through the window, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with peace. Because this time he was the one walking away, and I was the one standing tall. That night, after closing, I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, listening to the rain. It hit me then, how endings don't always arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes they come quietly, like the sound of rain easing on glass. And sometimes those endings are just beginnings wearing different clothes. The months that followed felt like breathing new air after years underwater. There were still difficult days, of course. Mornings when the silence in the house pressed too heavy. Nights when loneliness crept in like a cold draft through a cracked window. But instead of fearing it, I learned to sit with it. To listen. It's strange how quiet can become a friend when you stop running from it. I filled my life with small rituals that made me feel human again. I'd wake up early, grind fresh coffee beans by hand, and open the cafe before sunrise. The first smell of roasted beans each morning, warm, earthy, forgiving, reminded me that some things in life could still be trusted. My children adjusted beautifully. Lily began drawing again, her sketchbooks filled with sunflowers and smiling faces. My son Ethan joined the school debate team and started talking about studying law someday. I think he wanted to protect people, to make sure lies never buried anyone the way they buried us. One evening, while helping him with his homework, he asked me, "Mom, do you ever miss Dad?" I paused before answering. "I miss the man I thought he was," I said softly. "But not the man he became." He nodded, thinking it over. "I think that's fair." And somehow, that simple conversation healed a piece of me that therapy and time hadn't yet reached. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you do once. It's something you wake up and choose every day, even when the memory still stings. The cafe grew busier by the season. Locals started calling it the heart of Main Street. I hired 2 baristas, both single mothers, and turned part of the back room into a community corner where people could donate or exchange clothes, books, or meals. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was a place for second chances. And maybe that's what I had always wanted, not revenge, not recognition, but purpose. Every time someone walked in, shoulders slumped and eyes tired, I saw a piece of myself from those dark days. And when they left smiling, holding a cup of warmth in their hands, I felt a quiet satisfaction. knowing that healing doesn't always have to shout. Sometimes it whispers through acts of kindness. One spring afternoon, as the cafe buzzed with laughter and clinking cups, I got a visit from Martin, our old accountant. He looked happier, freer. "You built something amazing, Grace," he said, smiling. "Everyone talks about this place." I chuckled. "Well, I figured I should manage something honest for a change." He laughed softly. "You deserve it." We sat by the window watching the street outside. After a while he said, "You know, Daniel reached out a few months ago." I stiffened slightly. "Oh." He asked if I'd testify on his behalf, but I told him no. "The company's gone, Grace. The investigation closed. He's not coming back." I exhaled, realizing I hadn't been waiting for that closure, but it still mattered to hear it. "Thank you," I said quietly. As he left, he handed me a small envelope. "Something I found in an old file. I thought you might want it." When he was gone, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, one of Daniel's old company memos written years ago. It was dated the year we first opened James Logistics. It read, "To my partner Grace, thank you for believing in me before anyone else did. Whatever we build, it's because of your faith." For a long time I just stared at those words. Not because I missed him, but because I needed to remember that once there had been good parts too. Love that was real before lies corroded it. It reminded me that not every mistake erases the past. Some just end it. A year later, Grace Grounds celebrated its first anniversary. We hosted a small party. Live music, homemade cakes, balloons that my kids insisted on hanging crookedly. The place was packed with regulars, laughter echoing off the walls that once held my fears. At one point, as the crowd quieted to raise a toast, I looked around at all the faces, friends, strangers, new beginnings, and felt tears prick my eyes. I cleared my throat and said, "A year ago I thought my life was over. I thought losing everything meant I'd failed. But sometimes you have to lose the wrong life to find the right one." The room fell silent. Every ear turned toward me. I used to think strength meant standing by someone no matter what. But now I know strength is standing up for yourself, even when your voice shakes. Applause filled the room. Someone shouted, "To Grace!" And the crowd echoed it. "To Grace!" I laughed, embarrassed but proud. For once my name didn't feel like a question. It felt like an answer. Later that night, after everyone left and the cafe lights dimmed, I stood alone behind the counter. The soft hum of the fridge, the faint scent of coffee, and the flicker of the open sign. These were my companions now. I thought of Daniel somewhere out there, maybe staring at a different kind of empty room. I didn't wish him pain. I just hoped he'd learned what I had. That money can build a business, but only truth builds a life. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and stepped into the cool night air. The sky was clear, the moon a perfect coin hanging above. Quiet, unbothered, eternal. I pulled my coat tighter and smiled. Because this was peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind I once imagined, but the steady, gentle peace of someone who finally stopped apologizing for surviving. They say you never really know someone until you see who they are when they think no one's watching. I learned that the hard way. But I also learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You can start again." If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, by a life you thought was yours, I hope you know that healing isn't a destination. It's a daily act of courage. Would you have exposed him the way I did? Or would you have walked away quietly? Tell me in the comments. And if my story touched you, please subscribe, because sometimes the stories we tell are the bridges we build back to ourselves.